Did you
just a very small response to that is the web can give a voice to groups which just in no way had a public voice before, for good and for bad. Yeah? So the day that change.gov launched in the United States, for example, 15 of the top 50 suggestions to the Obama administration were for the legalization of cannabis the day that change.gov launched. Yeah? Is that a good thing, or is someone gaming the system? Well, essentially the web gives more groups, for good or bad, that opportunity. And therefore, if you're on the opposing side of that, you've got to be equally active to counter it. But probably more of those discussions are just happening in public now than they would have been 10 years ago.
Yes, okay, very good.
No, it's an important factual point that the kind of whole Islam debate in Europe, which is insane, I mean, it's utterly insane. It's come from the establishment. It's often come from the liberal establishment. Geert Wilders is a protege of a man called Frits Bolkestein, who was a much vaunted European commissioner who's in a Liberal Party, a right-wing Liberal Party. Sarkozy's played the card in France, so is Ségolène Royal. If we look at the Netherlands, there's people on both the right and the left who support it. The idea that Islam is a threat somehow to civilization came from the political mainstream. I don't think it can be polemised against enough. But I really think we should be clear that the people who have freelanced on that issue are people within the political establishment, which makes it particularly worrying.
Yeah. On that point, Phil Wallace.
Yes, indeed.
Good, right winger.
Okay, should we another question from the audience? Yes, in the back.
Okay. After what Sonny said earlier about myths that come out of the EU, I'm just wondering if this one might not be shut down straight away anyway. But I did read about a year ago, I think, about the EU were planning on some sort of passport or permit to blog, which bloggers would have to have.
Well, planning is very dangerous.
Well, mooting the idea. And we've heard the same sort of thing from Hazel Blears a couple of years ago. And it's also one of the complaints that you regularly hear from the media is the fact that bloggers can just open a blog account and start the next day. So could the future be a more professionalised blogosphere? And would that be a good thing or a bad thing? Putting barriers of entry up to bloggers before they were allowed to type anything.
Just going back on that one slightly, I think there's a number of, it will not surprise you, and it will not surprise anybody, there's a number of people in authority who don't like these hairy-ass people running around writing stuff that pisses them off. And they find ways and think of ways to stop them. And this goes back to the WikiLeaks thing in Amsterdam. There's always been people in authority who want to stop hairy-ass people like you from saying rude things about them, such as Mrs. Honeyman. So there we have a case in point. Now, the Italian government has been making suggestions about regulating the internet, regulating content, regulating things of this sort. Certain people within the institution of the European Union have looked at the Italian proposal and thought, that's interesting. Others have told them to take a running jump. I don't see it happening because I think there's enough people out there like yourselves who, no matter how much you might support the EU and its all its dreams, would think, oi, that's a bit much. And I don't see it happening. I think there's the genie is out. I mean, going back to the WikiLeaks thing, this is going to be the interesting fight. Is the WikiLeaks thing going to give the authorities of this world, our new world order, our transies, our who you call them, what you will, the UN, whatever, the excuse to come down hard on net freedom? And that'll be you. It won't be Mr. Assange and his carry-on. It'll be each and every one of us in this room. And that I think is going to be the true test of what happens with the WikiLeaks thing. It is going to be about that. And I fear that a great deal of the argument has now shifted since WikiLeaks into the power and the hands of those who closed down the net. Or reduced the net. They'll try. We'll try.
And also, it's not multilateral organisations which are trying to shut down WikiLeaks. It's the US government. It's not. And the US government and the French government were specifically saying, and the Australian government.
Get your head out of your blinkers. It's not just the US government who want to close down the net, you silly man. It is government. Government wishes to control the debate in every country. And their WikiLeaks will give government, plural, governments and international and transnational governments, the the drive to do something about it. It hasn't just embarrassed the US, for goodness sake.
John, you're
People
shaking
across
your head.
the world have been embarrassed by
No,
it.
I'm shaking my head because it's kind of going to just reduce the panel to the level of Mr. Staines from earlier on. So that's what I'm shaking my head about more than anything else. Just one very small practical point from your very ideological question, and you've done the ideological answer to, which I would agree with. There are practical limits to it, yeah, which is, for example, lobby passes in the UK, passes to commission press briefings in Brussels, those sorts of issues. How are you supposed to deal with that? Yeah? I tried it to see whether it would work, and astoundingly it did. Applied for a big conference in Brussels next week as a blogger, just to see whether they'd let me in, and they did. And so I'll be blogging about it next week. OpenGov 2010 sounds really riveting. Anyway, so practically speaking, if, and I don't have the time to go to commission press briefings, if I wanted to, as a blogger, could I get access to that, and how would I go about it? That sort of question to a practical level for getting the information from the institutions has not yet been answered.
We might have time for one more question, I don't know.
Something that's definitely a question, which is, there's a very strong tendency for UK politics to look to the US because they speak in English and, you know, we watch US TV, whatever. Do you think it's possible for EU blogs to help make UK politics look a bit more to other European countries as well as the EU itself, in terms of political solutions to problems, even though they're all in strange languages?
Yes, and I do that in as far as I possibly can, in that I follow German politics and Nordic and Dutch politics quite closely, and try to use examples, particularly online campaigning from those countries, to illuminate what I write about UK politics. What I would say as well is I've also been involved in an organisation of a big conference, Personal Democracy Forum Europe, which is about trying to do those sorts of things, bringing different people together from different European countries to learn about online campaigning. I got a strange comment at Labour Party conference this autumn from a Labour councillor I know. He said, John, you're probably the only person in Labour who might actually be able to speak about Swedish politics and really understand what's going on there. So there's nevertheless a language issue which complicates matters somewhat. But certainly I agree with you, it's vital, and in my own small way I try to do that.
Yeah, I would actually. Okay. I think there are actually, you can identify a number of issues which are where the effects of British politics from Europe. One is, I don't really want to call it environmental thinking because people get too hysterical, but risk thinking, certainly, the cautionary principle, although it was originally at the UN, but certainly in terms of the way in which it's managed and kind of conceptualised today, in a way that's had a huge impact on the UK has come from Europe. Actually, the debate about Islam, which I think is actually simmering under the surface in the UK at the moment. I don't think it's the terrain of the far right. It's a bit similar to the smoking ban, is once you legitimise that certain people doing something which is, you know, apparently innocuous, it's actually very dangerous for everyone else somehow. It doesn't really have to be explained. That can kind of catch on. At the moment, of course, the smoking bans as well came from Europe, a very, very retrograde step, in my view, on a libertarian kind of basis. The other thing which I think is really interesting, and it's certainly something that I'm kind of looking at as a kind of a general, more kind of broad thing, is to look at the German model. I don't mean the German model in terms of economics. It wouldn't be nice if Britain made more things. I mean, that's pretty good. But the German model in the way in which politics is kind of seen, in the way in which politics is managed, and the particularly German obsession for its basic law and all the rest of it, with the real dangers, made-up dangers of populism. And I think that's something else that's come very much from the Europe and the imported whole scale there. So I think there are ways. I think British politics is very influenced by European thinking. Certainly, I would actually probably argue that people like Ulrich Beck have had far more influence on British government policy than any American intellectuals I can think of.